But before we get to any and all of that, we're kicking off this week's podcast with our reactions to this year's Academy Award nominations, which were publicly unveiled last week. And so, with that being said, I don't think there's really a necessary need for me to give any sort of preamble like I usually do. I think it just makes the most sense to really get right into this because we've been waiting for about 6 days to share our thoughts on these nominations. If we've had some time to process them, react, and reflect to them personally outside of the podcast, but now we're going to go ahead and do so. So we won't cover necessarily every category. There's 23 categories. There's some things that I think we can wait and talk about when we do our final predictions in a couple of months here, because there's still some things that we both have to see. But generally across the board, we will cover the big categories. Before we just get the high level overview thoughts of things, I do just want to point out across the field, there was a diverse array of nominations that we saw across the board. Some surprises, some snubs that I think we'll definitely talk about. And then some things that I think we both kind of expected. Everything Everywhere All at Once is leading the field with 11 nominations, which is really staggering to think about. A really huge accomplishment. All Quiet on the Western Front, a Netflix film out of Germany, is second with 9 nominations, and also The Banshees of Inisherin, not surprisingly, also got a large amount of nominations, respectively, with 9 as well. Elvis picked up 8 nominations. The Fablemans picked up 7. And Top Gun Maverick is rounding out the most nominations for this year's award show with 6 nominations. And so, again, there are many specifics to get to. We'll talk about some of the categories more so in depth when we get to them. But I just want to get your general impressions, man. What do you think about this year's slate of Academy Award nominees? What's just the big picture takeaway after you saw everything unveiled last week?
Yeah, first and foremost, shout out to us. I think we really legit covered close to everything, if not everything, in all the big main categories. So a little pat on the back. I think we really killed it in terms of getting to the theater, last year and seeing, going out and seeing these films, man. The way we're able to give back on this podcast. So shout out to us for that. Shout out to Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everyone knows how I feel about that film, man. 11 nominations is huge. It's really dope. I think to see that film doing what it's doing, man. But a lot of my big takeaway from these nominations, on the positive side of things, is the way a lot of these movies feel. I think feels very different from previous years. Like, I don't know. I'm so used to, a lot of those artsy fartsy, nominations kind of creeping in and us being like, what even is this movie? But it ended up being a good movie type thing at the end of the year, that I'm very proud to see that most of the nominees for the most part here just feel like very different movies. Like, I don't know. There used to be some times where it was like drama. What is this drama? What is that drama? Drama with a spin in it. Drama with Meryl Streep in it. But now this time around, it really does feel like people are taking risks, and a lot of these films are not just here because they were the last minute end of the year, ploys for an Oscar. They really feel like a bunch of people who are trying to do something new and trying to say something. And so I really do appreciate, I think, this year's nominees and across the board for things like that. A lot of these awards or nominations do feel different, and so I'm having a good time at least looking at them. I'm like, dang, this movie is different from any movie I've ever seen. And I feel like previous years I couldn't always say that, even though they're really good movies. Don't get me wrong. It's just like, I feel like I've seen this movie before. And a lot of these movies I can't say that. So yeah, man, that's kind of my initial thoughts on how I kind of feel.
Yeah, I think after looking at everything that was offered up this year, it was a similar feeling that I think I typically feel every year when we see the Academy Award nominations. And I'm simultaneously having these emotions of elation as well as disappointment that typically is just the result of seeing this every year. Because, of course, there are many, many movies that we both checked out that I'm elated to see a part of the field, elated to see get celebrated in such a big and bold way. But I'd be remiss not to say that there's also definitely some disappointing aspects to this when you look at some of the gaps that might exist.
Yep.
When you look at some things, some actors or some films that didn't make it, or maybe you expected a bigger showing. That's going to be the case every year if you really follow this sort of thing. And for me, the Academy Awards, will always hold importance. And I know everybody doesn't feel that way. It's certainly
Hmm.
decreased in terms of its relevancy over the years, like many award shows have. But for me, it really does signal just where we are in the moment of time in terms of film and what we're watching and what we're consuming and what that current year says about the state of film. And I think that
Hmm.
this year is no different. And there's definitely drawbacks to that idea. And there's certainly some advancements and some progress that's been made where I'm super happy about it. I'm super happy that over the past 5 or 6 years, the expansion of the Academy has resulted in some of the things that we're seeing reflected here. I don't know if a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once 7 years ago would have been as
Exactly.
recognized as it is these days because
Hmm.
naturally the Academy has just become more international over the years. But as usual, there's still things where you look at the system and you say, that just doesn't feel right. Something
Hmm.
something doesn't really add up and make sense here, which we're going to absolutely get to. But for the most part, I do have to say that I'm really pleased with this. A lot of my favorite films and a lot of the things that I really enjoyed in 2022 are being represented heavily here, and I can't be mad at that. Of course, my head is scratching at some of these
Hmm.
other acknowledgments that we're seeing, and I'm just
Hmm.
like, well, how did this happen? But mostly, I will say that I'm very pleased with what's being represented here across the board. It really all will just kind of add up to what we see on the night of in terms of is this actually a moment? Are we actually saying something about the state of movies in the Academy in this day and age, or is it just going to be, oh, it's kind of the same old thing that we're used to seeing? I think that a lot will be said once Academy night does roll around up in March when we get to that point. But let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about some of these specific categories. Again, as I mentioned, we're not going to cover all 23, but do want to pick out some of the notable ones. Let's actually start off towards the bottom of the list here. Let's actually start off with best visual effects. And so for this category, it's always an interesting one for us to talk about because it seems like every year it just kind of changes in terms of what the Academy takes to in terms of the visual effects front. Sometimes we're like, that makes a lot of sense, and other times we're like, wait, how did that win exactly compared to this other project that we saw? But this year,
Yeah.
I gotta say, I think it's a pretty strong field. We have All Quiet on the Western Front,
Hmm.
Avatar: The Way of Water, The Batman, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and Top Gun: Maverick. We'll do final predictions a week before the actual award show airs, but what do you feel about the field? What do these movies say to you in terms of their visual effects representation being here?
Yeah, to be honest, man, like I don't know how else I could have, I think, picked, these nominees because these are all movies I think that excel in visual effects for sure. All Quiet on the Western Front they were actually doing, like, before this nomination even came out, they were already doing like a campaign for their visual effects, and I was seeing like befores and afters. I was like, I didn't notice that, but that's very important to the movie. And so I was like, as soon as I seen the nomination, I was like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me, man. We just talked about Way of Water. That's another ball game. The intricacy of the Batman. Oh man, just watching. If you haven't done so, there's like a 1 hour Dolby interview with Matt Reeves, and I forgot the colorist's name. He's a color/editor. I forgot his name, but they're beast. They just talk for an hour about how they got this film shot, how they edited, how they filmed certain things. 10 out of 10. Like, you go back and you'll never watch the Batman the same ever again after that. I promise you. It's pretty phenomenal, some of the things that they do. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. We talked about a lot of scenes there. Top Gun, the ridiculous movie. We know that to be, man. It's just, I think it's a really good category at the end of the day. I'm proud to see these nominees, man. I don't really have much to add or take away. I will say, in there could be an argument to fight for another movie here, potentially for visual effects, right? Where I see Black Panther again. Sometimes in my mind, I do see Nope. You know what I mean? Like, maybe Nope could be there over Black Panther. But again, overall, still pretty happy camper here.
Yeah, I do think it's important to mention like some of these notable snubs, quote unquote, that we might see in some of these categories. My pick as something that would have been here would have been Nope as well. And typically when I'm thinking about this, I'm not necessarily looking to take out a particular film because really
Mm-hmm.
all of these movies are extremely deserving, but you do just wonder like, oh, was there space for Nope to possibly squeeze in here? But I mean, all of these are incredibly strong. I think that when you look at a war film like All Quiet on the Western Front, we know war films traditionally do very well at the Academy Awards.
Mm-hmm.
Avatar: The Way of Water, that is an entirely visual effects heavy movie. Everything is a visual effect in that film. There's not real sets. We're not really on Pandora. They have to do
Right.
much motion capture. So you just think about the breadth of the work. And then these other films where it's a little bit more subtle, like the Batman and Top Gun Maverick, grounded
Hmm.
in reality, but their usage of visual effects really helps enhance the story. It's just all really strong stuff here. And so I'm really happy with this field across the board. I don't necessarily know who wins. I would probably end up picking Avatar: The Way of Water, but again,
Yeah.
it just kind of depends because we've seen other films that utilize visual effects as more of an invisible method as opposed to the obvious in terms of what's
Hmm.
really being recognized here. And I think sometimes that invisible VFX industry, the stuff that we don't even know is a part of the film, like probably even de-aging. Some of these actors that are in like their 50s or 60s, they get de-aged and we don't even notice it. But that's like visual
Hmm.
effects work, right? And so I think that those things are sometimes the intangibles that aren't necessarily accounted for in predictions. So I definitely want to give some thought to that. The next one we should talk about is best original song because this is interesting. So we have Applause from Tell It Like a Woman, Hold My Hand from Top Gun Maverick, that's by Lady Gaga, Lift Me Up from Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which we've probably all heard at this point, by Rihanna, Not To from RRR, which did pick up the Golden Globe, in fact, and
Hmm.
This Is a Life from Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so I think the notable snub here is that Taylor Swift song from Where the Crawdads Sing. She did get nominated
Hmm.
for a Golden Globe, but was not nominated here. But beyond her, I don't really know if there's any other like big notable songs that could have been included here. But how do you feel about this field and what's represented?
Yeah, no, these are all great songs. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know even know which way it would lean. Part of me wants to say not to just because the Golden Globe, you know what I mean, that it got, and it's a really good song. But these are some fire songs. To be honest, I forgot everything every all at once had an original song until it got nominated. I was like, wait a second. Oh yeah, that is a thing. So I did forget about that. Which I don't know, could speak to the nomination for other people too. I don't know how people feel about that, but man, I think it's another competitive category. To be honest, like of course I'm rooting for everybody black to see maybe a Tim's or Rihanna, pick something up here. But I think Not To still feels really good to me in terms of a song that could be iconic. But again, another good feeling category, I think, to me. But it's I actually haven't seen Tell It Like a Woman, so I can't really speak to that as well. But it seems fun to me.
Imagine Tim's, Rihanna, and Ryan Coogler all winning an Oscar based on this song. That would actually be kind of crazy if you ask me,
Crazy. Hmm.
because Black Panther is, nominated for other awards, but not a Best Picture award in this particular year. But Ryan Coogler could still potentially pick up an Oscar based on providing
Hmm.
the song, which would be phenomenal. I will say I think Not To is the odds-on favorite here, just based off of conversations and what's being seen across other voting bodies and just the momentum behind it as well, because RRR isn't nominated anywhere else, which
Hmm.
is another thing that we should kind of just briefly
Yes.
talk about. That would have been the movie that if it was to show up in any other category, I think it would have been in the best international film category. It
Yes.
made it made a huge campaign towards that to be recognized and acknowledged. We both had it on our top 10 list for the year. It's been acknowledged on many other top 10 lists for 2022 as well, but this is the only one that it's being nominated for. I guess, in hindsight, which seeing these nominees and also seeing the field and seeing like what else is represented, I think does shine some light onto the conversation as to why something might not have made it a little bit further than you expected. RRR is a big action spectacle wrapped up in a romantic comedy, wrapped up in a musical, wrapped up in a historical drama. There's a lot going on there. And I just wonder
Yes.
if maybe that movie went over some people's heads and they didn't get it, because it is the movie that, and I think we talked about this when initially reviewing it, that it just might not be for everybody because it's
Hmm.
it's crafted in such a unique way. It's such a different style of movie, and it's coming from Tollywood, which is still growing in terms of just its representation across the world and how many people have access to those films. But I guess I just think in RRR, it's kind of that movie that some people just didn't really gravitate towards it as maybe, some of these other films that are being represented as far as an international sort of piece that's getting included here.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. It's a little annoying, I think, in that front, just because there were so many. I remember like 3 days before nominations come out, somebody randomly tweeted about RRR, and there was like this big thing on the internet of all these film critics and people hyping up RRR, and then we get to nominations, and it's just not in the best international, feature film category, and it's like, I don't know. I felt a little bit of betrayed a little bit. It's like, weren't we all in agreement like a couple days ago about how good this movie is? So I think to your point, I think it is interesting that it may not be for everybody, but it's also like this movie should also be praised because it's doing something different. Again, I haven't seen literally like four out of the five other best international film features in there, but I know they're not the crazy epic the RRR is, right? Nobody has really talked about a movie like that came out last year. But yeah, it's weird, man. So I get, and if anything, I guess it would be a makeup call to give it song, but it's also like a slap on the wrist. You know what I mean? It's like, we gave you what we could give you, and that's a weird feeling too for me.
Yeah, I mean, Decision to Leave as well from Park Chan-wook did not get acknowledged in Best International Feature, which I think a lot of people would have assumed if it's going to get
Mm-hmm.
sort of a nominee, it would be in that category, and it did not. What I find interesting as well about this year is how many respectable, legendary directors are just
Mm.
presented at all. There were a lot of great directors that dropped films, and they're not here. They're not present. The Park Chan-wooks, Damien
Yep.
Chazelle, Jordan
Mm-hmm.
Peele, Noah Baumbach from his White Noise movie that he just dropped on Netflix. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
really credible directors that are just not present, and so I find that as like an interesting trend that is a little bit unusual because some of those more respected filmmakers that have a pedigree that people know and they know that their work is typically great are just not being reflected here, and so I think it just kind of says something about sort of the state of things where because the membership has grown so large, it's almost at 10,000, I think, at this point.
Wow.
It's really hard to drive consensus across the board. I think we might be past the days where like you would get a film like let's for example, Everything Everywhere All at Once, 11 nominations. It's not winning
Mm-hmm.
everything. That's just not going to happen. There used
Right.
to be a time where a movie that would get 10 plus nominations could damn near sweep
Sweet.
everything, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of take everything that it was in consideration for. I think those days are long gone. I don't see that happening, and I think we're also seeing that represented in the talent that's being included in these categories. So again, it'll be interesting to see just how the field shakes out once awards night rolls around. Let's move on to best cinematography. So here we have All Quiet on the Western Front, Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths, Elvis, Empire of Light, and Tar. Conspicuous by its absence is Top Gun Maverick, which
Mm.
I both talked about many times. Like, oh yeah, it's gonna get cinematography. Like it'll be there, and it's not here. It's not here at all. Now these movies,
Nope.
even though I haven't seen Empire of Light, I will say all these movies look great. Uh,
Yes.
Empire of Light, I will say, even though I didn't see it, the great Roger Deakins DP'd it, so
Yep. I'm sure it looks great.
kind of a shoe in. Like it probably looks tremendous. I won't ever doubt him. He's a legend, already an Academy Award winner. But anything else stand out to you? Any other surprises or just sort of overall feelings about this category?
Well, Nope is another snub there. That, in some ways you kind of just like you make history, the way you shoot this movie, the way black people are on screen in IMAX, for the first time in a horror film is just like, hello. I don't know. Maybe we need to expand categories now. Maybe we're sick of the five entries. You know what I'm saying? Give us seven or something nowadays. Because now you're right. Top Gun. Where's Top Gun? It, people were operating cameras and flying planes at the same time. I don't care what the movie looked. That's nuts. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. And so I'm just looking for, yeah. I just don't know what's happening. In some of these cases. I I do want to give a shout out to Bardo. It's not my favorite movie, but the way the things and going on in that movie and the way they're shot is nuts.
It's
Some of
incredible.
the sequences and the way things are moving in the camera and people, it's nuts, bro. And I think because a lot of people haven't seen it, I am afraid of that movie kind of falling under the radar a little bit in terms of cinematography. Like some of these other movies are even, everybody, a lot of people have seen Elvis. A lot of people have seen All Quiet on the Western Front. It is being talked about. Bardo, not so much. And so I'm glad at least to see it here in the nomination, man. But again, besides, a couple of those absences, it looks good, but I just wish they were here somewhere. Those two movies in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, if Top Gun was included here, I think we would have a little bit more of a competitive race. I don't know. To me, it just seems like All Quiet on the Western Front is the obvious winner. Just looking at this
Mm-hmm.
list and based on what's here, all of these movies are visually impressive. I definitely don't want to also sneeze at Tar. The shots in that film are composed excellently and brilliantly.
Yep.
Like there's some beautiful cinematography across Tar, and I haven't seen Empire of Light, but Roger Deakins, I trust in him. But I think All Quiet on the Western Front, when we talk about the technical stuff, that
Mm-hmm.
has really elevated above what we probably assumed would really belong to a Top Gun Maverick or even Avatar: The Way of Water. Those films felt like they were kind of the runners for a lot of these technical awards, but All Quiet on the Western Front, again, that war film sort of pedigree that's just been a part of Academy history is once again present here. And it is a
Yeah.
great film. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, All Quiet on the
Yes.
Western Front is a genuinely great film. I don't want to take anything away from it, but I do find it somewhat surprising. Like, the big Netflix play this year is that film. And
Yeah.
it almost serves like a couple of purposes. Like, Netflix hasn't traditionally done that well in the past at the Academy, but in a film, or excuse me, in a year like 2019, where I don't know, The Irishman gets like 13 or 14 nominations and walks away with nothing. And then you get 1917, which came out in the same year. They sort of combined efforts. They have the Netflix movie, but the Netflix movie is also serving as the war movie. And so
Yeah.
they actually have an advantage from that perspective to really get the accolades that they've been searching for over the past few years in terms of that recognition from the Academy. Let's move on to Best Animated Feature Film. So this one is kind of stacked. We have Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Puss in Boots, Swish, The Sea, which is on Netflix, and Turning Red, which debuted on Disney Plus last year.
Wow.
The animated feature film category every year, I think, continues to astound me just because the work is just so incredible. I know last year was amazing and it was kind of a toss up at a certain point in time. This year is equally amazing as well. I will say, if I'm being honest, Marcel the Shell, there's a lot of humans in that film. Like, yes, the characters are absolutely animated. The primary character that we're following is an animated character and it's based off of the YouTube series. Like, I get it. I totally get it. But I mean, there are a lot of human beings in that movie, like the actual actors. And I know that like even the voice actors for the animated characters were on set. Like, they were filming on set in a house. They were doing that stuff. And so yeah, I don't know the param. I know some of the parameters. Like, I know a movie like Avatar: The Way of Water cannot be included here. They took out motion capture performances, which, if you look at Avatar, that kind of is an animated movie, but they're not considering motion capture. So I get that, but I don't really know. I don't know where you draw the line with this. And so that one is as amazing of a film as it is. I love that movie. It is interesting that it made it in here to me. But beyond that, I think that this is an incredible category with a bunch of incredible films that I really enjoyed last year.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be because of the hybridness that I guess it just qualifies. Like, I do know it's like live action / stop motion. However that works, as a category. And part of me thinks they didn't know where else to put it. They wanted to recognize it, but they were like, can't go in best film. But it got a little bit of animation. Let's just throw it in here to at least, somebody can look at it somewhere. So I think that's kind of my idea of where how it got there. But man, Stacked is right, bro. This is an amazing 5 movie. I haven't even seen Puss in Boots, but just the word of mouth that I've gotten from Puss in Boots is enough for me
My Lord.
to know that it should belong there. I also haven't seen the Sea Beast, but actually word of mouth about the Sea Beast is just as good as Puss in Boots for a lot of respects, man. So I don't, to be honest, this is one where like part of me thinks, the Academy loves Guillermo. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They love Guillermo. And
he's the safe choice if you have to put if we're
safe choice
today, I would pick him.
Yeah, but it's also like the craftsmanship that went within Pinocchio, which I know they love. So I wouldn't be surprised if Guillermo comes out of it here. But again, nonetheless, very, very, very proud of this category.
Yeah, Pinocchio wasn't even my favorite animated movie from last year. Like, if I'm being honest, I like Turning Red and Puss in Boots and Marcel the Shell more than Pinocchio. But Pinocchio,
I agree.
It's still great. And shout out to Puss in Boots. It just crossed like 335 million worldwide at the box office. Like you said, that word of mouth is just going crazy. It's sticking around, having really long legs. And Turning Red, we're going to discuss it a little bit later as well, just in terms of the amount of minutes viewed on Disney Plus. It was one of the most viewed films on streaming all year. So it's incredible to see animation in a really healthy place. But as you said, the craftsmanship and the fact that Guillermo is just nobody dislikes him. He's like the nicest guy in Hollywood. So it's like kind of seems like an obvious choice at this particular point, but I'm just glad to see it's such a strong category and definitely intend to check out The Sea Beast before Academy Awards night. Let's move on to Best Original Screenplay. So here we have The Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, and Triangle of Sadness. Man, this is a really strong category. I think
Hmm.
those screenplay categories, both original and adapted, are always really impressive across the board. And this one is certainly, sort of living up to that expectation. I think I said it when we were talking about our top tens. I do think that the Banshees of Inisherin had the best script of any movie
Hmm.
last year, but I, come on, like Tar, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Triangle of, like all of these, man. I mean, they're just really sharp scripts, really great writing across the board. And I think it can kind of be a toss up, really. It could,
Hmm.
but I do think that this might be an indicator of just where things are leaning for the entire night when we start to craft like,
Mm.
well, what's the narrative? Who's walking away with like the most amount of trophies?
Yeah.
Where does the momentum seem to be swinging in terms of best picture and best director? I think that this is going to tell a lot because we're seeing a lot of repeated nominees here, like Banshees, Fablemans, Everything Everywhere all at once. I think this is probably going to tell us more when the night comes than we might
Hmm.
know now.
Yeah. I think I might be slightly on the Tar train here, just because it's Tar, man. The way the screenplay in that film is so, I don't know. It's a lot, man. It's a lot going on. Kate Blanchett had to do a lot with a lot of those words. A lot of those. There's a lot of long shots in there. There is a lot of pretentious talk also in there, but understandable and pretentious on purpose, for a reason. And it's like, I don't know. I really enjoy that film as a screenplay, I think, and that's that kind of the way I'm leaning. As much as I love Banshees too, this is again another amazing category. Just wow, across the board, man. Like you said, I think the energy. This will tell a lot, depending on who wins this. The energy will definitely start gravitating one way or another, man. But again, what just another really good, solid pieces of writing here, man. Again, previous years, I don't know. They didn't. Some of these sometimes it didn't make me feel like this, but now looking at these, man, I'm like, ooh, this could really go either way they want it to in the Academy. So I think that's how it should be, though. It should be like this. And so again, another category I'm really happy to say that I think they got it right. So yeah, shout out to them.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Definitely going to have to give this some thought when we actually like put together and formulate our predictions. Best adapted screenplay is next. Here we have All Quiet on the Western Front, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery, Living, Top Gun Maverick, and Women Talking. And so this one is also interesting, just considering what is included here. Glass Onion receiving, I believe, the only nomination out of any
Mm-hmm.
of the categories, but it's nice to see Ryan Johnson, sort of be included here for something because Glass Onion is just such an entertaining movie. Living is a film that has had a very, very limited release. Bill Nighy also got recognized. I think that's a movie we'll both still have to check out. I think it's gonna have a theatrical run really, really soon here. I've seen some posters around, and so I think
Yeah,
in the next couple of
like
months we'll get a
now it's
chance.
like a small. They got a small one right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really small stuff, and I think it's going to expand over the next couple of weeks. I'm happy to see Women Talking here as well. I discussed that movie a couple of weeks ago, Sarah Pauly. That's an incredible script. It's
Mm-hmm.
all dialogue, but the one that I am a bit surprised about that didn't get included here was She Said. I thought that probably would have had a
Mm.
good chance of
Yes.
picking up an adapted screenplay nomination since that is based on a book, but it's not included here. But how do you feel about this one?
Man, I think what's interesting to me is seeing All Quiet on the Western Front, knowing its history in previous iterations of the film and how beloved that is. I think that's interesting to just see it here again. Like somebody just took it and was like, "Hey, let's do it again." It's 2022 at the time. It's like, "Oh, let's do it again." So I think it's interesting to see that here. But man, seeing Glass Onion here, I was a little surprised just because we didn't see it anywhere else. You know what I mean? It wasn't popping up anywhere else, and they give it a best adapted screenplay. But I think I agree. Like I'm happy to see they like here Ryan Johnson. We should at least talk about what you did in this movie. You know what I mean? We should talk about it at least a little bit. Haven't seen Living, like you said. We gotta check it out. I'm just a little surprised about Top Gun, just because it doesn't scream. This is what they were nominated for to me. Like I don't know. Like I, like you give it best adapted screenplay, but then cinematography is not in it. I don't know because it feels more like a cinematography movie than a best adapted screenplay movie, and yeah, it's just very interesting to see it here. But again, glad to see it here. Haven't seen Women Talking, um, but again, I hear good things, man. So actually, this is probably one of the categories I feel like I have the least not skin in because I have seen half of these films, but I like really don't know which way it's gonna go here. So I have to wait and see. for me personally.
Yeah, it's kind of anybody's game, I think. I will say on behalf of Top Gun, Chris McHugh already won an Academy Award, so I think that there's just a little bit of adoration there for him to come in.
Hmm.
And he wasn't even the primary writer. I think he came in and touched that movie up, did
Hmm.
some rewrites like he typically does. I think Tom Cruise is like, yeah, man, we got to punch this up. Like we gotta make this even better. And so perhaps I think that might have helped sway some of the votes towards that direction. It would be sick if it won. I don't think it
That'd
will.
be pretty crazy.
See if Top Gun won a screenplay nomination, like who would have saw that coming? But
Hmm.
it's tough to pick out. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of tough. I think once we see Living, that might tell us a lot as well in terms of like
True.
where the favorite might lie, because that could have an incredible screenplay, and we just walk out and say like, yeah, that feels like the obvious winner, but we'll have to see.
Hmm.
Let's move on to the acting category. So we have Best Supporting Actor. Up first, we have Brendan Gleeson for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brian Tyree Henry for Causeway, Judd Hirsch for The Fablemans, Barry Keoghan for The Banshees of Inisherin, and Ke Huy Quan for Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is a great field. I really, 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 really love who's represented here. You
Yeah.
have two people from The Banshees of Inisherin, both Brendan Gleeson and Barry Keoghan, which I'm happy to see that. Brian Tyree Henry has to be the surprise for Causeway. I mean, we reviewed
Yeah.
the movie. I don't know if either one of us, like, we had hopes, of course. Like, it's a really slow, quiet, very methodical movie in terms of its pacing and the conversations that are had. But I don't know if I would have walked out of that film like, yeah, it just seems like an absolute lock that Brian Tyree Henry is going to get acknowledged for this performance here, though he was great. And I'm just so happy to see it. Judd Hirsch comes into The Fablemans only for like 5 minutes, but he does take over the movie. He's not in it that
Yep.
long, but if you see it,
Hmm.
he owns the small sequence that he's in, and
He
sometimes
does.
that's all it takes. But come on, is anybody really winning this award here outside of Ke Huy Quan? Like, he's the front runner? He got to be, right?
Yes. Yeah. He's the favorite of the year, man. He has a story that nobody else has ever had. He has an energy to him, a push that they're giving him, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. The award's already won. You know what I mean? It's really his to win, man. It's like it's one of the probably one of my favorite stories this year in terms of the Academy Awards, just how it feels and when he tells his story, and how it feels when he gives speeches, and how it feels to what Everything Everywhere All at Once not only means to the Asian community, but what it meant to him as a person in the industry. It's his to win all the way throughout, man. But like you said, what a great category. Brian Tyree Henry getting Causeway. Just the fact that he got nominated, I was like, whoop, rooting for everybody black. Brian Tyree Henry is here. I didn't see it coming. But also when you think about it, like, I have to throw it out there. This wasn't like the most supporting actor year ever in the world either. And like the only other notable snub I remember somebody seeing was like, I think Paul Dano, in The Fablemans. I think a couple people were talking about. But man, I'm pretty proud to see Brian Tyree Henry here. Brandon Gleeson. This is great, man. I really do like this category.
Certainly. Best Supporting Actress, we have Angela Bassett for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Hong Chow for The Whale, Carrie Condon for The Banshees of Inisherin, Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Stephanie Hugh for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And so, similar to the Best Supporting Actor category, in this category, we have a couple of people from the same movie, both Jamie Lee Curtis and Stephanie Hugh from Everything Everywhere All at Once. But another really impressive category across the board. I'm very, very surprised, if I'm being honest, to see Hong Chow here for The Whale. It didn't seem like
Mm-hmm.
that there was a ton of momentum behind her, but I'm glad that she's being
Yeah.
acknowledged in that film, and there's multiple performances being acknowledged. Carrie Condon is also incredible in The Banshees of Inisherin, and I expected her to be here. But I think that we have all sort of acknowledged and recognizably so have bowed down to Angela Bassett, because this is
Yep.
her year to finally get that trophy and to be acknowledged in the way that we all know that she deserves. She's been here before, of course, with other nominations, but I think that just all the heat is behind her. Black Panther Wakanda Forever and what she did in that film is just, it's seemingly at the front of the race. It would be hers to lose at this point, and I just can't see that happening, because it's just too much. It's too much behind her. And I love Everything Everywhere All at Once, but we're gonna be in a situation where, like, the people that do vote for Jamie Lee or Stephanie, they're gonna split the votes, and that's gonna create a tough situation for either one of them to come to the front. So I think Angela Bassett just walks away with it.
Yeah, it's Angela's to win. It is what it is. And everyone, like you said, has already bowed down to what is going on here. I do think Ryan Coogler literally sat down and was like, we got to get her this nomination. What dialogue, what part of the movie can we give this woman to make sure she gets in? I think they did a tremendous job of using her in that film, again, to not only serve the film and what it is, but to serve as Angela Bassett as a legendary actress and legendary, again, for us, Black actress, like I wasn't even born yet, but I know in 93, everybody was like, so why she ain't getting no Academy Award for What's Love Got to Do with It? Like, where's the win here for that movie? Because she really is that tremendous, man. So of course, in some ways, she deserves it right here for Black Panther. In other ways, I do feel like it's a little bit of a makeup call. Legendary. This woman should have been and had one. Give her this Academy Award at the same time. Both things I think exist here, and I love that about it. Only other thing I add, a couple of things to add. Hong Chow, glad to see that she's here, man. The Whale kind of doesn't work without her. You know what I mean? Like when you watch that film. Also, we just seen her in the menu, so I'm glad she's coming around more. She really is a tremendous actress. And then Stephanie Shu, man, in Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is only the beginning for her, which is I think another reason they won't give it to her is like she's one of my. I talked about this before. She was one of my favorite character introductions on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She came in and ate that show alive. Everything Everywhere All at Once is just another performance that's like she could easily become one of my favorite actresses really fast with a little bit more work. And I'm really excited to see her here. So again, I love to see her, but it's definitely Angela's to win.
Yeah, Stephanie almost, I mean, we know Michelle Yeoh is the best actress nominee in that film, but Stephanie Shu, she comes in and takes over that movie. Like in the halfway point, it really becomes a little bit more about her. It becomes kind of a two-hander. And Hong Chow for The Whale, it almost feels like more people have seen the menu. And so it's like, oh, well, The Whale is the one that's going to get nominated, but we're kind of nominating her for The Menu because she's just incredible in that as well. So I think I just love the moment that she's living in right now, that more people are just starting to recognize her name and her face across the board. So it's really cool to see. Let's move on to Best Actor. Here we have Austin Butler for Elvis, Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Paul Mescal for Aftersun, and Bill Nighy for Living. So this is another, I think, impressive category. And to be honest, it's hard to predict a winner, I think, at this point. For me, it feels like a three-person race. It feels like Austin Butler versus Colin Farrell versus Brendan Fraser. Like those three are the front runners, I would say. That being said, Paul Mescal getting here for Aftersun is incredible. Ooh. You just said it like a week ago. Like you hope that Aftersun got something, like some sort of thing. And I think appropriately so, his leading performance in that film is the one that's being recognized here. And then, of course, Bill Nighy, who I have no doubt he's phenomenal. He is, growing into just such a really notable and tremendously versatile actor. So can't wait to see Living. But this is hard to pick at this point because of the fact that I do think it's a three-person race. But do you feel differently, or how are you seeing this, sort of shape out over the next few weeks?
This is another one of those categories where I wanted one more person to slide in, and it's another like movie a lot of people haven't seen, nor is it, I won't say the greatest movie. It's a really good movie, but it's not, Academy Award. This is the top 10 movie of the year. But John Boyega in Breaking is absolutely amazing. I haven't seen, again, Living yet with Bill Nighy, but this is like one of those things where I'm like, can we add one guy to this? Because after watching that, I was like, this dude is doing something different that I haven't seen him do before. Again, the movie is fine. It's a pretty good movie, but sometimes those performances are just tremendous, man. And I think John Boyega did something in that film. Paul Mescal and Aftersun, I'm just so happy to see him here. I think this kind of feels like Marcel the Shell in the same way, where like it's such a under radar but really good film that the Academy Awards usually wouldn't talk about, you know what I mean? And they feel like they can't talk about because they have their own rules, which they should break them at some point. Aftersun should be here somewhere outside of Paul Mescal. But I'm just really happy to see it, man. We talked about this dude is picking up work after Aftersun now, and the things he was doing, man. I'm just really glad to see that they got the nomination. But I absolutely agree. I think it's the 3-man race here. You can't take anything away from Austin Butler and what he did in Elvis. Not my favorite movie. I probably wouldn't even agree it should be in the movie list at all in terms of best picture. But what he did in that film is undeniable to me. Colin Farrell, The Banshees. I don't even have to say much about that. Just tremendous job all the way. Initially we were all on the Brendan Fraser train in The Whale, but because of trends and the way things are going, we're looking at this like, yeah, it's definitely a 3-man race. And I don't know which way it will go. I don't think I'll be mad at either, but part of me does feel like they should still just give it to Brandon. But again, we're gonna have to see. But again, like you said, really good category, I think.
Yeah, there's good stories behind a lot of these people too. Brennan has a great sort of comeback story similar to Kihi Kwan, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's a
Yeah.
big factor. Colin Farrell had probably the best year of his career last year between the Banshees of Inisherin, the Batman, and I just
Yep.
checked out After Sun, which is also another just great film. He was just firing on all cylinders, so that momentum might really carry him. But Austin Butler is like this new hot actor, really really young, has a tremendous career ahead of him, if he can stay on track. So it'll be interesting. I think we'll be able to tell more in the next few weeks here, but it's a competitive race to say the least. Now let's move on to Best Actress, and this is where really I think the big conversation point comes out about
Oh yes.
who's included in this list, but I'll just read off the nominees quickly. Kate Blanchett for Tar, Ana de Armas for Blonde, Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie, Michelle Williams for The Fablemans, and Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now, I don't really know where to start. I think that this is a interesting conversation on many fronts. Let's just start. Let's start with the surprise entry here, and that's Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie, and
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get to the movie in a second. But nobody's heard of this movie at
Nope.
all. It's made $27,000 at the box office. So literally nobody's seen it. You really can't even have an opinion on it because it's been seen by so few people. And so when it made it in here, I think everybody collectively probably went like, wait, who? What is this? Except people that were in the know and of course have been a part of the voting and definitely were sort of expecting possibly that this could potentially happen. Now, To Leslie, if you don't know, is a small independent movie that came out last year. Andrea Riseborough has been acting for years now.
Mm-hmm.
She's a known name and face, but not a superstar, I would say. But the film came out last year, and the director Michael Morris, his wife Mary McCormick, is also in the industry. Made a huge campaign to get this movie recognized and connected with a lot of people in the industry that she's very close with, most notably some very prominent female actors, people like Kate Blanchett, Kate
Mm-hmm.
Winslet, Gwyneth Paltrow, like really, really huge names in Hollywood, very influential people to really rally behind this movie and to get some buzz behind it. And also even Edward Norton held like a private screening to get more people to see it. I know there were additional luncheons that were had because this film did not have a multi-million-dollar Oscar campaign behind it like many of these films do. Like you can't drive down Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood and see 30 billboards for To Let
Right.
because they just didn't have that type of budget behind it. So it was a really grassroots campaign to get Andrea Riseborough recognized here. Now, once this did happen and we saw that she was included, the conversation then became, well, wait, what is this movie? And secondly, well, who did she possibly knock out because of this grassroots campaign? Which I don't know if we can necessarily look at it that way, but the notable snubs here, which many people have sort of already acknowledged and recognized, would be Viola Davis for The Woman King and then Danielle Detweiler for Till, because
Mm-hmm.
they recently both just received Screen Actors Guild Award nominations, which is the acting branch, a part of that particular guild, which is very similar to the Academy branch, which is the largest branch in the Academy. So there just seemed to be a big disconnect in terms of, well, how did this movie make it in? What is To Leslie even about? Like, just people just don't really have an opinion on it. So I think it just collectively caught everybody by surprise. But it's created just such a stir in conversation about
Mm-hmm.
political underpinnings of the Academy, the fact that it is, at the end of the day, just a club, that people are a part of. And if people rally behind a particular thing that they want to see succeed, well, here's a case in point of how they can do it and achieve that. We'll talk about the other nominees, but I do think that we do have to just talk about this campaign because it's just out of
Yes.
nowhere. And there have been, similar sort of grassroots campaigns before, but I don't think we've ever seen it to this degree where somebody was able to come to the forefront of just one of the big five categories and do so in just such a quick way because this all happened very, very fast. What do you just think about the makeup of this and how it all shook out?
Man, oh man. I don't even know where to even begin or where to start here because it's so I don't even know what the word is. Like, how did we get here? Like, To Leslie at this point in time right now has made $27,000. $27,000 in a limited release. And we know, as you just said, the Academy not only works, it's not just meritocracy, right? A lot of it is campaign. A lot of it is how much money that somebody has. You telling me this nomination got pushed in here after, and it was like a last ditch effort too, though, for the campaign. Like
It was about
Kate
2 weeks.
Blanchett, yeah,
Yeah.
Kate Blanchett tweeting about it.
She
I
gave up
just,
her speech at I think it was the Critics' Choice Awards. She won for
oh
talk
man,
and used that platform to big up Andrea Riseborough in this film. Which, look, you've seen the movie now.
yep,
I've seen the
mm-hmm.
movie. I it's an incredible performance. I'm just gonna say
It's a
that
good, it is,
I think it's an incredible performance, and I don't want to take anything away from it. I don't think that
yes,
she's undeserving, and this is all subjective anyway. It's art. It's not like a sport where we can
right,
use numbers, but there is something to be said about the political nature of it and just how it all
mm-hmm.
came to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just how it came to be, how it got here. I absolutely agree. Performance is tremendous, but when you get the spot of two black women who also probably should have been probably have bigger campaigns with more money behind them. When you get that spot, people are going to look at that a certain way. I don't care what the campaign was. I don't care how it got in there, but when it happens, that is the nature of what you have now done. This $27,000 movie that it has made is now, it just looks different now that it has taken. You tell me Danielle Detweiler and Viola Davis isn't in this spot just because these last minute campaigns happen. It's I just how people are going to feel about it. It's how I feel about it. It's how I'm going to look at it. People have been talking about Danielle Detweiler for like 6 months. You know what I'm saying? People have been talking about Viola Davis and the Woman King for the same amount of time. And this woman makes it in with a movie nobody has heard about. I don't know where to start or where to begin there again, or how to tear that apart. But it's just not a good look. Again, the movie is fine. The performance is tremendous. If it had come out earlier in the year, made more money, Kate Blanchett maybe talked about it not 2 weeks ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, then maybe I would feel different. I don't feel different because that's not what happened. And because of that, it's a problem. It's a problem. The Academy, I don't know. It doesn't even feel like it should be possible to do this, but it is. And now instead of me saying, oh man, I really love Andrea Riseborough and To Leslie, now I have to sit here and say, man, Andrea Riseborough and To Leslie stole the spot from two black women who probably should have those spots. To be honest, there's three spots on here that don't make any sense to me that those two black women should own. Is this the weirdest one? Yes. But like, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And so yeah, it's a problem. This is the nomination that felt like we took 2 steps back after taking 1 step forward. Because the past couple years, we've been like, okay, Academy, you did decent. Academy, you did decent. This nomination comes out, and the way it came about felt like we took a couple steps back with all of this. So yeah, I definitely feel some type of way about it, but it's more to be discussed.
So, a couple things. First and foremost, 93 of the 94 winners of the Best Actress Academy Award have been white women. The only person that's ever won this award that is not a person that of Caucasian descent is Halle Berry. She's the only black woman to have ever won this award before. So historically, black women have just either not been represented largely in this category and to a much smaller degree have been represented in the winner and who comes out on top in this category. Now, when you look at this year's field, personally, and if I'm being honest, I feel more strongly about Ana de Armas for Blonde being here than I do Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie. Yes, the campaigning and what unfolded over the past couple of weeks is weird, and I'll get to that, but Blonde is just, it's an awful movie. It's hard to get through. It's not good. As fine of a performance as she might have given, as beautiful as it may have been, and I know a lot of actors have recognized that. Colin Farrell at the Golden Globes gave a whole spiel to her right in front of her face, like he cried at her performance. So I get that they're probably seeing things that I can't see and I can't get past, but I'm actually more upset at her inclusion for this award, not her personally, but just that performance in that film, than To Leslie. Now, Andrea Riseborough is obviously the elephant in the room because nobody heard of this movie. Nobody's seen it. Which you said it perfectly. This is not necessarily about merit. I do think it's an incredible performance. I think that movie revolves around her. If you see the movie, I think she deserves to be acknowledged. I really do. And she's a tremendous talent. I've seen her in other things.
Mm-hmm.
She's really, really good. I think the issue is that we've reached a place where finally you have black films, black filmmakers, black actors and actresses who have started to gain the resources that it takes to be placed in these positions. When you look at films like The Woman King or Black Panther Wakanda Forever, these big movies that have big studios behind them that can pump in the money necessary to deliver a multi-million-dollar campaign to get in front of the eyes of Academy members, we've now reached that place where that is becoming more of a reality. The Woman King has damn near every ingredient that you can ask for out of a movie that would typically be acknowledged here. It's a sword and sandals movie. It has a notable director, Gina Prince Bythewood. Viola Davis is largely respected and very much loved across the Academy, as we know. It's a historical epic. It's based off of real events. Like, it did well at the box office. People generally loved it. Like, it has everything you could ask for in terms of what can make it in here. I do wonder, and this might not be fair to say, and it might just be a representation of where we are, but I do wonder if Black Panther Wakanda Forever took up the space of The Woman King. There's some similarities across the board in those two films. If we're just honest, there are some similarities, and there's only but so many spaces. There's only 5 represented spaces in most of these categories except Best Picture. And I do wonder if you just look at the board again, because of what people see and what they don't see and what they're going to invest their time into, even though they probably should be watching everything, they're probably going to go to the Marvel movie that they know that already has like a pedigree, as opposed to the one that they just, they didn't get to. That's not right, but it just might be a factor. Just something I want to point out there. But I think at the point that we finally get to the place where the resources are now being put into these black films to now get these campaigns up and running, now the rules have changed. All of a sudden, it feels like the goalpost has been shifted. But in actuality, it just takes a bunch of really notable A-list actresses to get behind a particular performance, to tweet about it, to tell their friends about it, to host a few private screenings. Now this can be pushed to the forefront. That's always been the case. It's always existed. But in this particular year, as you said, when there's 2 other black women who gave off some pretty tremendous performances, the optics are they're starting to look a particular way. Again, this is not to tear down Andrea Riseborough and her performance. It's more so to just lament the fact that there is a system in place designed to favor white people in this system, and particularly in this category, white actresses, because the white actresses are the ones that rallied around Andrea Riseborough in this movie. The Kate Blanchetts, the Kate Winslets, Gwyneth Paltrow, Christina Ricci just came out today and said something. So of course they're going to gravitate towards it because this is the movie that they're going to spend their time to see and talk about and do this campaign. But we've never seen this type of support for any other black films. We've never seen any other, white actresses or white actors say, you have to see that movie. You like that is the performance of the year. That should be recognized. We've never seen that type of support. So now the rules are changing again. And so in the next 5 years, a small black film is going to have to figure out, how can we be a part of this conversation? How can we go against the grain and do something different? Because spending $3 million on a campaign doesn't get the job done anymore, but it's always got the job done. What the fuck is that about? So it's a really tough conversation. And I think it's really weird. And there's a lot of varying opinions on it. I don't know what's right and wrong at this point. I do know that it's disappointing. And it's a bit frustrating to see that stuff like this can go down. So much so that now the Academy is apparently investigating this whole thing, which is what are they really going to do? Probably not.
Investigating?
Yeah, they're investigating. If To Leslie technically broke any rules, because you can't promote a movie over any other potential nominees. You can't say, To Leslie compared to what I saw, for the rest of the, specifically name out actresses or other movies. You can't do that. That's technically breaking the rules. But I think other films and other campaigns have broken rules before. So what are we investigating? Is it just to say that we did something, just to acknowledge that there's blowback? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. I don't know how to feel about it really at this point. It's a lot of emotional feelings. But then you look at the rest of the category, Kate Blanchett, Michelle Yeoh. I feel like they are the 2 front runners. They are to be, the ones to win.
But those other 3,
it's okay,
I don't know.
In the Fablemans, but then there's there's some people. There's some people that would say, but that's subjective though. To at the end of the day,
right? No, you're right.
Liked her, but other people are probably going to say well, that was her movie. It was really from a lot of it was from her perspective. I'm not mad at her being in here. Again, I wouldn't I'm not here to take out anybody per se, though I have personal feelings about everybody. It is more so just to speak to the fact of just like how things are working lately. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think Kate Blanchett wins at the end of the day. Like it's a conversation we're having right now, but I think Kate walks away with it. I think Michelle Yeoh is a close second, but it just feels like Tara and Kate and just like everything that everybody has said across the years, like she's the one prime to win. She's going to get her third Academy Award after all this.
Yeah, I think that's what'll end up happening as well. As much as I want Michelle Yeoh to win, in fact, when we do our prediction, our list comes out, I probably will just be the hopeful guy as I usually am and put Michelle Yeoh as a winner on my list. But I do see Kate Blanchett also just getting those eyes and getting the talk. So I think that people might end up going with her for Tar as well. But yeah, man, it's easy to be frustrated at this category for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about Best Director. Here we have Martin McDonagh for The Banshees of Inisherin, the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Steven Spielberg for The Fablemans, Todd Field for Tar, and Ruben Östlund for Triangle of Sadness. And so I think impressive across the board, but notably no people of color necessarily, well, outside of Daniel Kwan, who is a person of color, no other people of color represented in this category. You're not seeing Jordan Peele here. You're not seeing Gina Prince Bythewood here. You're not even seeing Ryan Coogler or James Cameron. There's a lot of names left off of this list,
Yeah.
especially films that are included in the Best Picture category. So there are a few people that I would say are quote unquote snubs, but I think I'm not that surprised by this, if I'm being honest. And it could potentially also turn into another three-way race. I think, Martin McDonagh makes a great case for Banshees. The
Mm-hmm.
Daniels are totally not out of it for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That could be the surprise of the night. And Steven Spielberg, obviously, I mean, one of the greatest of all time,
Yep.
telling essentially his life story finally. That's a story to tell in and of itself, awarding him this award for, sort of having the fortitude to bring this to the public. There's a lot to be said about this category, and in recent years, I think we've seen a split. We see a best director win, but then that best picture doesn't correlate to the best director. Typically,
Right.
they kind of split the votes. So I don't know if it'll really tell us much on Academy night, but it's still a strong
Mm-hmm.
category, I would say, nonetheless.
Yeah, part of me is wondering if they do revert to that though this year. I don't know. Something about this best director category feels like, okay, who are you picking for for movie of the year? I don't know why it feels like that to me this year. But we'll have to see what happens. What still does feel weird, just a little bit, is Triangle of Sadness. It's something about it that I don't know. Again, there's so many websites and people that talk and they do their predictions, and then none of the people that I've watched were like Ruben Östlund for Triangle of Sadness is going to get a nomination. I don't know. That just feels weird to me. Like I don't know. Usually I'm like we're able to predict and get it, but maybe the Academy just felt different about that movie than other of us felt. I don't know, than other people felt.
I've
It's a very
seen him on a
interesting
lot of like
nomination to me.
outside. It wasn't like a top five thing, but I've always seen his name included in
Yeah.
the conversation at least. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that surprised to see him here. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Triangle of Sadness is a great movie.
Yeah.
But it was, I think he was more of an outside shot initially coming into this conversation and sort
Mm-hmm.
of etched his way in there. But if I am being honest, I don't know if I'm thinking back to the directors of the year. I don't know who realistically would have superseded him. We talk about James
Right. Yeah. No, I know what you mean for sure. Yeah.
talk about even Joseph Kosinski for Top Gun Maverick, but those kind of feel like now in hindsight, those kind of feel like, well, they had a chance, of course, because those films
Mm-hmm.
incredible, but did they ever really get any sort of like hot contention behind them, especially James Cameron, who's been there so many times before. But
That's true.
it's a tough field again. Even Baz Luhrmann for Elvis probably could have been in there too, because Elvis was
That's
seen
true.
people and had a lot behind it. So there's a lot of questions. I think it's always the case of, okay, this got nominated for Best Picture, but then this did not get nominated for Best Director. So like, did the movie direct
Exactly.
itself? Like, how did that work? How do we end up here, right? So
Yeah, no, it would be like super weird if like again anybody in this best director category wins and then somebody who's not in the category gets best picture to me. Like let's say the Daniels get it for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and they're like, but the best picture of the year was Elvis. I'd be like, all right now, like, are we like what are we really doing here?
oh
Kind of
man.
time, I would be just a little confused. And what I do feel like if somebody in the best director somebody else in the best director could still win best film, if that makes sense. Everything Everywhere All at Once wins best director. I could see Banshees of Inisherin movie of the year. If like,
Sure.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because they were also nominated for best director. I feel like you said, recent years, they have been deviating out a little bit. So I could see that. I just don't see anybody still outside of this best director winning best. I don't think they're going to give it to Avatar, All Quiet on Western Front, and I think it makes sense when you kind of look at the list here. But it's like you said, it's stacked, man. It's another crazy one where it's like, yep, that's fire. Yep, that's fire. Yep, that's fire. So I'm excited, man, to see which way they lean here. I will say, as we go into Best Picture and what we just got done talking about for Best Actress, would have loved to see Gina here, Prince Blackwood here. Would have loved to see her in this Best Director category. Just knowing, she said that shoot wasn't easy for her either, and just knowing what they went through on The Woman King is, yeah, it's still a little disappointing and sad, but again, still really good category.
For sure. And last but certainly not least, Best Picture, which we have 10 nominees. All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, Top Gun Maverick, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. If I'm being completely honest here, I think that this is super strong in this year in particular. I would have liked to see some other films here. Like I would have liked to see The Woman King, of course, and we talked about that. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm actually really pleased by this. I like all of these movies on this list except Elvis. That's the only one where I'm like, okay, all right, what are we really doing here? Everything else, though, if I'm being transparent, I'm satisfied. I'm very satisfied with this list. I think it's balanced. You have a couple of blockbusters here, which we haven't seen in a few years. Avatar and Top and Elvis all made a lot of money. You have the film that really nobody saw coming that ended up exceeding every expectation for the entire year, stuck around with Everything Everywhere All at Once. You have a really auteur-driven story about a director and his upbringing, The Fabelmans. Women Talking is really, sort of looking at a sort of a political situation, with women, that's an all-female fronted cast. Triangle of Sadness representing international stuff. All Quiet on the Western Front doing the same thing, as well as a war film. I think there's a great amount of variety here if we're just looking across all the different nominations. And so it's tough to say. I do have a pick for this category. I won't reveal it yet, but it is it can still go a couple of different ways. I think that there's still at least like 3 strong contenders here. And I wonder, I don't know, I wonder if 10 nominees is needed. I think 8. Yeah. I think 8 can really get the job done. Like I want 5, but 10. Now that I'm really starting to look at this year by year, we might see a situation of like, well, they might reduce it. I don't know if they will. They probably won't because they get yelled at every year for doing so. But I would be fine with like 8 really strong ones. Because still, Elvis here, I'm like, okay, we don't need that one. But be that as it may, I'm pretty satisfied with what's included here.
Yeah, I do feel like you can, shave a little bit of stuff off now. Just for me, again, looking at this list, I'm like, I could probably take that off. You know what I mean? And I feel like, maybe like you said, they might go down. Maybe next year is like, we're like, oh man, we're happy they kept all 10 because this is ridiculous, kind of type thing. But again, I think I do still like people being at least recognized a little bit for the work they put in this year. Like again, I said at the top of the year, man, it's a very competitive field because of, again, the variety. Like we said, all of these look amazing. All of these are very different films, and I think we haven't really got that all the time in previous years. But it should be, yeah, it should. Like you said, I have a pick. I won't reveal it yet either, but I definitely see a couple ways that it could still go. And again, sometimes both me and as sometimes the night goes, you go, they won that award, they might win this other award, or they didn't win this award, they might not win this award. And so it's starting to feel like that as well. We're just gonna have to see how it shakes out. But again, this is a pretty great list here, and I'm happy to see all these films here for the most part. Again, just those weird small snubs. And again, I just have to be sad about Woman King, man. I can't help it. I can't help it. Shoot, and in a lot of ways, I am kind of sad about RRR too. I think it, also would have had a spot here as well, but it's still looking good to me.
Yeah, before we wrap up here, I do want to shout out The Batman, got 3 nominations. Babylon also got 3 nominations. It didn't get really any love from like the big categories, but love that movie still, so it did get get
Hmm.
nominated. But yeah, some other notable snubs, as you said, The Woman King, Nope, pretty much got shut out across the board. Those are films that I know we both elevated, across the end of the year and stuff like that, and wanted to see acknowledged in some capacity, but was not. But we will of course be back again the week before the Academy Awards airs to present our final predictions for the Academy Awards this year.